Welcome everybody behind your screens all over Europe. My name is Angelika Eder. I'm one of the two directors of Genshagen Foundation and head of the section Art and Cultural Mediation in Europe. Since October, our huge project Culture and Sustainability, a creative exchange in Europe, is online with a lot of discussions, talks, presentations and art to watch in the 3D gallery. In the frame of the German EU presidency, the idea was to facilitate an interdisciplinary European exchange about the creative potential of culture in the whole sustainability discourse, but also about the responsibility of art and culture regarding the consequences for the climate. The Genshagen Foundation stands for bringing people from different fields with different backgrounds together, enabling a European exchange not only between the countries of the Weimar Triangle, Poland, France, and Germany. Until March, we used to invite our speakers and the audience to our castle in Genshagen, south of Berlin. It is a perfect venue for European encounter. Since then, we are learning, as you all, to develop new formats, to organize Zoom meetings, but to offer also other forms of input and exchange. The huge advantage is, of course, that we reach people without traveling, and we can provide all material, like the film by Jonathan Ramsey, online for a longer time. I am very happy to welcome you all, that you are all not too tired of watching discussions on screens and decided to listen to our discussion today. From my point of view, it is a very interesting panel as three active key figures in the discourse of culture and sustainability with different backgrounds meet here today. My thanks go to the Minister of State for Culture and Media, one of our two founders and main sponsors of Genshagen Foundation, who supported this project in the context of the German EU presidency. I also thank my team here in Genshagen, especially my colleague Magdalena Nijau. I give now the microphone to Theresa Leisgang, who will moderate the discussion. Theresa Leisgang is a journalist and author who has quite deeply dived in our topic throughout her professional life. She explores the connections not only between transculturality and climate crisis. Her latest research project led her from South Africa to the Arctic Circle on a quest to find ways of living well in times of crisis. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for this very warm welcome. Also from my side, my name is Theresa Leisgang. I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. And yeah, following what Ms. Eda has just said, I think it would be nice for all of us to just take a moment to really arrive well in this space. Maybe to realize again that we have bodies in front of the screen. You might want to take a look around your room that you know, but your nervous system will be able to arrive a lot better when you're just taking this moment to arrive here together with us tonight for this panel discussion. I would like you to ask you to shut down your cameras if you're in the audience, because this talk will be recorded and available afterwards as well. And you're very welcome to ask questions in the chat that I will later on ask to our panelists. I'm very grateful that these times of crisis actually do make it possible for all of us to meet in this virtual space. And maybe it's a good time to just also acknowledge and feel into this gratefulness that this time also gives us, alongside all the difficulties that we're living. And I think we're here especially for exploring that, for hearing inspiring examples of what creative innovations the arts and culture can bring to us in these times that sometimes look very dark. So we have a fantastic panel tonight. Let me shortly introduce to you who's here with us. You're very welcome to add a fun fact about your life if you wish. We are joined by the UK, by Lucy Latham. She holds a degree in environmental sciences and political theory, but she wanted to put all of that she learned at university into action. So she joined Julie's Bicycle, which is a London-based charity that supports the creative community to act on climate change and environmental sustainability. And Julie's Bicycle has a number of programs that I'm sure Lucy will tell us about tonight. One of them is the Creative Climate Cities program. So they do have a Policies and Cities program that really wants to see what is the role of culture in driving urban transformation. What can the cultures add to that? So I'm very welcome to have you here tonight, Lucy, to speak to us about creative climate action.
Great to be here. Thank you, Teresa.
We're also joined by where are you? I'm gonna see Jonathan Ramsey. Do you want to say hi? People can see your face once. Here he is. He's he's sitting in his basement in Warsaw. He's joining us from Poland tonight. Jonathan is a filmmaker. His latest film, which has the title It's Okay to Panic, translated to English, has reached an incredible success during the Corona lockdown. It was viewed more than 800,000 times on YouTube so far, and thereby has exceeded all the expectations, I guess, that you could have for a documentary on a topic like the climate crisis. The main character, Professor Malinowski, is a climate scientist, leading climate scientist in Poland, has already been part of a panel discussion here with Stiftung Genshagen. And one thing that is really, I think, extraordinary about this is to see that Poland has a big community still, also in the politics of populist leaders who are climate denialists, or at least don't really follow the argumentation that Professor Malinowski maybe would. So this portrait, this film, that is a very personal one, that really touches also on the human side of what does it mean to be a climate scientist, has been able to make that jump. And I'm really excited to hear more about what is it that in a piece of art can inspire change, maybe. And we're also joined by Nicole Loeser, who is part of the Institute for Art and Innovation, whose really main goal is the facilitation of purpose-driven interventions at the intersection of art, science, technology to catalyze positive transformation. If you go to their website, there are a few really inspiring claims, I think, that really sum up what we want to talk about tonight. Culture and sustainability, how does that go together? And one of these claims is, or the vision maybe, to allow playfulness and beauty while addressing serious issues and proposing new futures. Nicole is just about to finish an academic degree in where she has explored you help me? Plastic
circular economy. Yeah.
Plastic circular economy.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear more about that. And one of the big projects of the Institute for Art and Innovation has been the Universal Sea project. That also deals with plastic, and that had quite a big impact. Nicole, you say about your work, if I do something, I want impact. So I'm really happy to explore that more. How can we get to actually trigger these points that are going to incite change in society, a change that is dearly needed. Welcome.
Thank you.
I have myself traveled for a research project, a journalistic research project from South Africa. We wanted to travel overland all the way to the Arctic Circle. We had to cut short the trip a little bit, but we did manage to visit the UK this summer, and I was really inspired by, the sheer this bubbly feeling. There's really a feeling of things are moving in the sector of culture and the arts in the UK in a way that I hadn't experienced it in Germany. And I would love, Lucy, to hear from you. What is one project that you have supported through your work at Julie's Bicycle that really, for you, holds this value of bringing together a creative approach to the environmental breakdown that we're seeing?
Thank you, Teresa. I hope you can hear me okay. It's really great to be here. Hi, everyone. So as Teresa said, my name is Lucy and I work for an environmental charity called Julie's Bicycle, and we work with arts and culture. In terms of your question, it's very hard to think of one project or one organization. I mean, something that I think here in England that has been so monumental in changing the national conversation in arts and culture is the partnership that we hold with Arts Council England. And Arts Council England is the national cultural funder, and funds, sort of between 700 and 800 organizations on a regular basis. So obviously is a hugely influential body. And back in 2012, Arts Council England brought in a new policy for all of the culturally funded organizations to report on their environmental impacts and to develop an environmental policy and action plan. And this new policy intervention basically changed the conversation here from something that a lot of arts organizations wanted to do and knew it was important, but didn't necessarily have the tools and the knowledge to act. So when Arts Council brought in this policy, they partnered with us, with Julie's Bicycle, to deliver the sort of sector support program that would mean these organizations were able to report on their environmental data and documents. So JB developed these resources. We have a carbon calculator for cultural organizations that is free to use and accessible to everyone. We put on a series of events and webinars to talk to cultural organizations about the main environmental issues of arts and culture, to help them understand what the impact, what the carbon footprint might be of their actions and activities, and help them develop strategies for reduction. Now, this is all super practical. It's rooted in data. It's about managing your buildings, your festivals, your production. But what we've seen over these last 8 years or so is not just the environmental impact of the sector reducing, but also more creative programming, more communications, more organizations who are putting sustainability at the core of their narrative and their vision and their values as organizations. And that's what's really exciting, is that we see from this increased sort of knowledge and understanding a proliferation of artistic responses as people become more encouraged, as they become more bought into the agenda. And I think critically, when people know they're doing something, they're acting on something, even if it's small, it gives them the confidence to advocate. And this is what I believe arts and cultural organizations are in an amazing position to do, because they can do something that a lot of scientists can't do, that unfortunately quite a lot of politicians won't do. And they speak to people on intellectual and emotional levels. They speak to people from the head and from the heart and with the hands. And that's an amazing position. And that is I suppose, a partnership project which has really galvanized a lot of change within the sector. And from that point, you have organizations across the country doing amazing things, developing sustainable touring models, turning their buildings into renewable power stations, developing plays and films and exhibitions which shine a light on humanity's relationship with its natural environment. So yeah, there are tons of examples. I can obviously talk more about any of them that you want to hear more about.
Yeah, thanks for giving us this broad overview. I think you framed it quite well, that it's about like zooming out, like what does it mean if a cultural organization actually changes their billing, changes their own carbon footprint. I think it is quite remarkable that in the UK, a number of big galleries, including Tate, as far as I know, have declared themselves a climate emergency. That is something that hasn't happened in Germany so far, that there is really an approach from the big museums and institutions to say, we have this responsibility, and that is on the level of your billing, of your own, like of your lighting, of your, like what do you actually produce, but then that this, as you said, can also incite more creative action within the programming, within the ads. I do remember the artwork by Olafur Eliasson, which was displayed in front of the Tate galleries in 2014, which was called Ice Watch. I don't know whether you remember. So there was these huge ice blocks that he brought to make people in the city understand what it looks like if the Arctic and the Antarctic are basically melting, if our pole caps are melting. So yeah, just people in the cities could watch these ice blocks melting. And there was a big discussion at the time as well about this artwork itself not being very sustainable, of this artwork itself having a negative impact on the environment. Do you think that that is like an interesting debate to go into, or where do you see the debate at in the UK at the moment?
Yeah, so interestingly, Julie's Bicycle has worked several times with Studio Olafur Eliasson, and the second time to Carbon Footprint Ice Watch. So, as you say, Ice Watch was this really celebrated public artwork where large blocks of glacial ice were brought to London, but other key cities to coincide with COP24. So as climate talks were happening, it was almost like, politicians, you're running out of time. You have this physical stopwatch timer, rather, in the background. And I mean, you're right, there were questions regarding the environmental impact of such a piece. And there quite often is whenever an artist does sort of a substantive piece of work that's talking about the environment. What Olafur Eliasson did do, which is absolutely the right course of action, is to work to understand what the impact was. So working with Julie's Bicycle to do a carbon audit, to do an analysis of this work, it is key to looking at the ways that it could be reduced or offset if that's the way that someone wants to go down. Carbon offsetting is a whole other area we can talk about, but then being transparent with that information and being able to share it, almost say, we acknowledge there is an impact, because guess what? There is an impact for every single thing that you do. And there comes, I think, I don't think we should just do things and say, yes, there's an impact, but it's more important to raise awareness. I mean, who knows to the extent you can sort of balance those things out. But I do think if you calculate, if you work to understand what the impact is, baseline it, if you take the measures possible to mitigate, to reduce, to be as efficient as possible, and offset everything that can't be reduced, and then use that in your narrative, in your storytelling, to talk about impact and to talk about connecting the comms and the advocacy and the art to practical change, then we have a kind of, more of a holistic picture of how arts can really interact with this issue and shine a light on the opportunities and the challenges and be really transparent about it.
Yeah, I have seen on the web platform, Culture and Sustainability of the Genshagen Foundation, that the Berlin-based artist Joanna Moll actually also explores that quite a lot in her work. So she has this piece displayed on the web platform, which is called Deforest, which basically shows how many trees it needs to absorb the amount of CO2 generated by the global visits to google.com every second, which is 52,000 visits every second. And so, yeah, I think the crucial question here, as you said, is what kind of an impact will this artwork have? And I think there I would love to hear from Jonathan about his film, because there we've seen exactly that, an impact that was maybe not really expected to that extent. Jonathan, you said that your film was pirated so many times because it was published in the time of the Corona crisis,
right,
for a festival that where it was supposed to be shown, and you had this time frame saying you can only watch it for 1 week. So
yeah.
Probably thousands of people must have pirated it and watched it because they wanted to watch it. And to get people so excited to see something about the climate crisis, I think is something quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it was certainly a strange, unique kind of situation. I don't presume that everybody saw the movie, but basically the movie is about the life of a climate scientist here in Warsaw. He's a very high level physicist at the University of Warsaw, and he goes on TV regularly here in Poland and tells people that we are in deep trouble and we need to change our ways. And he's a teacher in the university. He's the head of the geophysics department. He has all the qualifications, and he's very, very outspoken. And the film is kind of a portrait of his life because he's 62 years old. He lived through the communist era in Poland, grew up there, and then when the wall fell, he lived through the entire transformation and saw how Poland has changed over the last 30 years. And he has seen this amazing economic growth that we have, and it's killing the planet. So on the one hand, Polish people are very proud. They think that they're growing and that things are getting better. But if 80% of our electricity is coming from coal, and we are buying more and more cars every year, we're using more and more energy, it's not a good path that we're on. And so the film is it's not a scientific film, it's a personal biographical film about his point of view and how does it feel to be someone with that level of knowledge who understands the problem so well. And he has a position where he can communicate with people who can make a difference. He goes to the media, he goes to the government, he says what he feels, and the effect is very minimal. People don't listen to the experts because we're having too good of a time. And so it's a sad film, but it's very personal, and it's about his point of view. And so basically we did all of that filming for that movie last year, and we were editing it when the coronavirus hit. And then it was supposed to be released in May, but then the festival that we were signed up for, they had to postpone because you couldn't do the festival. So what happened was we didn't want to. We see the climate crisis as so urgent that we didn't want to wait 5 months for a film festival that may or may not happen. So we said to them, look, we want to be part of your festival, but can we do a deal? Maybe we can release it for a short time and let people see this movie, because we thought it was important. So we did a deal, and we said, okay, you can put it on YouTube for free for 1 week. And after a week, you take it offline. And so we, like not a lot of Polish movies are made about the environment. There's very, very little money spent on these kinds of things, and people are not very interested, and it's not that popular. And we had this 1 week at the first week of June, and it was just when the virus was starting to get better, the lockdown was over, but then there was still this like lack of new content because a lot of things got delayed because of the virus. And people were just looking for something new that they could focus on that wasn't the coronavirus. So we had a week, but then we got all of these sort of media people, celebrity people on Instagram, whatever, and the movie kind of went viral in a way. And it was building up this wave all the way up until the end of that 1 week, because people made this whole online thing like, see this movie, it's really important, you have to see it before it disappears at the end of the week, you have to see it. And then, we got over 600,000 views in Poland, which is, 38 million people in the country. But to get 600,000 views on YouTube in less than a week for an hour-long biographical environmental film, it's pretty good number. And we got a lot of free press, like on TV and whatever, because the fact is that nobody ever made a movie like this before. It doesn't exist, not in England, not in the US. Like when we think about the environment, we think about like who are the head figures. You have somebody like Al Gore, he's a politician. You have David Attenborough, he's a environmentalist, but he's also like a TV presenter, and he knows how to deliver a line. And we have somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio, who he's an actor. And all of these high-level environmental figures make this content and they make these movies, but none of them are taking any real personal risk themselves. It's always about the big global problem and how it affects all of us, but it's not personal, and it doesn't connect with a lot of people. And I wanted to make a film that was more emotionally resonant. And like this Professor Malinowski took a personal risk. He did not need to make this movie. He went out on a limb to do it. And it took me a very, very long time to convince him to do it. But he urgently believes that we need to do something. So our whole approach, like we made this movie with very limited resources. We tried to get money from some of the film institutes here in Poland, from some of the major environmental groups operating here in Poland. We tried to get funding from some of the media groups. They were not interested. We ended up they all said, oh, we want a film about the problem, not about the man, not about but for me, you need that deep personal connection with somebody who you trust, because the climate issue is scientific. There are things that the average person does not know and will never understand. But if you can build a connection with somebody who does understand, who does know, then you just like, okay, I'm with that guy. And so that was kind of the concept of the movie. And it's very biographical. We go a little bit into his past and his family life and why he cares, because and so I think the movie resonated with a lot of people because it was a fresh approach to the problem, and it was that 1 week limited time thing built this extra boost, because it gave it this urgency. And so
actually it made me think a lot about the question of timings and of a person that is up front. Made me think a lot about the relationship maybe between also the story of Greta, that also was a very like timely thing to happen. And also I would like to see.
You're talking about the new Greta movie? Did you see the new Greta
so her documentary, I would also like to see it as an artwork. Like it actually did touch me.
I just watched it. I it seemed like they were probably thinking in a similar terrain like I was thinking. And we need more movies like this. I saw the Greta movie as well, and I thought she was really brave. And she didn't need to do that. She could just say like, no, it's about the climate. It's not about me. But she recognized that people need that personal connection. They need to identify with somebody. And I think that a lot of the environmental movement has, it's very divided and fractured, and people have their different issues. Some people want to focus on transportation. Some people want to focus on being a vegan. Some people want to focus on ending coal or whatever. There's all these different ways you can approach it. But I think we need to get more skin in the game emotionally. That's
more skin in the game. I like that. I think there's one other topic that we are going to explore a little bit later on is about more the system, maybe, of support, like how is the funding system for all of these kinds of work that I think also like the other panelists have something to say about. I think this is a topic that would be really interesting to go into as well. So your film in Poland at least has like made a little celebrity of Professor Malinowski, this climate scientist, where you told me that you went to a vegan burrito restaurant and people would just recognize him on the street. So I think this question of can art inspire change is also something that's been very much at the core of the project Universal C that Nicole Loeser has brought into life at the Center for Arts Institute for Art and Innovation. And I would love to hear a little bit from you, Nicole, about what kind of change has this project about the plastic pollution inspired?
Thank you for the great question. It's quite difficult, let's say, because when we founded the Institute for Art and Innovation in 2017, actually, we had already initiated the Universal C project. I myself have been a curator since the last 15 years and have been running my own gallery that is now a bit silent, let's say, due to Corona. But we at the Institute for Art and Innovation, we wanted to bring the creative powers together, let's say. So to leverage the creative potentials of art, science, entrepreneurship, and policymaking together with the public, we believed in co-creation solutions. And therefore, we wrote this proposal and sent it to a lot of foundations, also in the beginning to German foundations. But no foundation actually could agree on funding because we were too interdisciplinary, and we didn't fit at all in all these in all their strategies, let's say. And only under the Creative Europe program of this EU funding program, we were lucky actually to meet their goals. And it was also a creative process, let's say, because on one hand, my idea behind this project was really, as we face so many anthropogenic issues nowadays, how can we actually bring artists to the table? And because they are often forgotten, not only artists, all cultural actors, let's say. And on the other hand, if you have these kind of roundtables in the policy area, then there are all kinds of stakeholders in it, but actually not the social workers in the fields and no cultural actors. So we at the Institute for Art and Innovation, we really believe in the power of artists and innovators. And artists especially, because they can create emotional and intangible works. And I believe they also can remind us of the full potential of a human, of being a human. And I think this is so important because our time is really shaped by all these difficulties that we have to overcome, and we have to agree on common goals. And it's really about value creation and value sharing. For me, it's also not so much about purpose, because it could be also your purpose to just be profitable, right? But as we need these kind of transformational change towards a positive future, I think we need everyone on the table on an equal level, and so that everyone can feel invited to be part of the change process. And lately, during the Corona epidemic, I also focused more on future prototyping workshops, for instance, where we have also an artistic setting, but we invite all kinds of stakeholders to think about circular visions or other sustainable visions. And with this EU project, University, it was interesting because I myself, I'm very much into the whole water pollution topic, as I think that there will be wars on it, right? Maybe even in 10 years. So this is the most urgent issue for myself. I mean, climate change, of course, is also very disturbing and also very urgent, but the water issue concerns me even more because there is so much plastic already in it, and we are drinking, we are breathing, we are eating plastic the whole day, and it has so many issues on our health, and not only that other species are already dying, but yeah, ourself is also so much disturbed by that. And what was really interesting was when the project started, we were only 4 core partners, and there was also a Polish partner, by the way, the Center of Polish Sculpture. And very interestingly, we also had an artist in residence person from also from Poland, and she was one of the first artists in Poland actually who focused on plastic pollution, yeah. And this was interesting, and the project itself went only 1.5 years, but we thought, yeah, of course we would have, let's say, 10 activities in the public sphere, would co-create and find solutions. But in the end, we had 70 partners on board, including 20 universities in 12 countries, and had these kind of co-creation workshops. And so many participants. I think in the end, it was more than 5 million people participating in our activities, and more than 2 million people online watching our events. So that it was so inspiring because as people had waited for this kind of program, let's say, because on one hand we brought artists to the table, so it was super inspiring and very creative, and artists even because we ran 3 open calls, I had the feeling that there were not so many people or not so many artists that did create artworks beforehand, but they were inspired to be part of the project. So this was one very great outcome, let's say. And on the other hand, we also brought them together with innovators and scientists, and this was another great outcome because then we could see actually how they inspired each other, and that all the questions that were raised even brought us deeper to the topic and why the plastic epidemic looked like in different areas, so very bad actually. And this kind of inspirational process, this kind of joint efforts toward a common goal, I think this was really a key of co-producing solutions, so that people could inspire each other, could learn from each other, and share their practices. And even the public. The public was invited, so even they could contribute to the project, and this was so also wonderful that we finally also published a book where more than 600 artists were covered and more than 500 solutions also were distributed. And this is still a book that can inspire. It's kind of a yellow pages, let's say, in this kind of field. And for us, it was really about this whole proof that art and innovation really need to be married so that we can find more effective solutions. And on the other hand, also have these kind of artistic outcomes where people can mirror themselves. And this is why I'm also now into these future prototyping workshops, because here I can do it even online. Yeah, I don't need all these financial supports and so on, because yeah, we can just do it online, and we just can come together and face all these different issues and can co-create. And then hopefully there will be also time that we can explore on the long run that these solutions get implemented. So maybe just to
it
now.
resonates really a lot to also see the positive impact that these times can bring, and that some things might become even easier when we do it online, and it's not always the old Zoom meetings that everyone is tired of. I would like to invite you to just like check in again whether you're sitting comfortably, because we are bodies in front of a screen. I would also like to invite the audience to put some questions into the chat, if there are any. I have a lot more. What I've just heard from you, Nicole, is that that Universal C was a project that didn't only bring together innovators. I think what you call innovators are entrepreneurs, startups, people who develop actual products, right?
Not only, it could be also social innovators or NGOs, so all kinds of change makers, let's say.
Yeah, so that was very like inclusive and like a tangible project, so people could really like grasp it through different kinds of medium also. You've told me that sometimes what you miss in the bigger discourse of the arts is maybe a language that really points to the future, something that is like accessible and not only in the sealed community of the arts maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different spheres, let's say, where artists are in. And often I have the feeling, and I call it art, that artists just create art for, let's say, art professionals, or art collectors or art lovers in a way, and not for the public. And for me, it's always more interesting to work on intersections, because I think even artists, they want to get inspired. And nowadays, as we have so many potentials, let's say, so many opportunities, for me, it's really a creative time. And art was never that important than now, So I think it's... art can help us to figure out how we can deal with these uncertain times in a way, on one hand, and on the other hand, it's really about, as I said, to bring out these kind of visions, how we could live in the future. And some artists, of course, they are more into patterns or into consciousness, behavior, whatever. And I think this is all important. But at the moment, we have so many issues, really urgent issues, that we need really this kind of creative abilities and forces to bring us a step closer to the solutions and to a positive future. So for me, it's really how can we focus on a well-being so that the youngsters don't get depressed, right? So, and I meet a lot of young people, and I've never seen such sad young people, and I think this is a kind of waking call for us to really come closer and figure out how we can change this super wrong system.
Yeah, I sometimes really, I think, like to look at it also, this what you describe as sadness, maybe as a kind of depth, just like this longing for really a sense of like living well together with other critters, with other beings on this planet, that maybe young people now, as we've seen in the big youth protests for the climate, have more, or a little bit like more attuned to, more awakened to than they might have been a few decades ago. I think what did come up was definitely this sense of there needs to be a space in which artists and innovators can be creative, and this space that needs to be held by institutions, because I've heard of all three of you now, at least Nicole and Jonathan, you've said that you have proposed your project to several big institutions and nobody wanted to collaborate. They were not interested in maybe a new form of thinking, and even maybe in the topic. In the opening session to this whole series of discussions, there was also the question raised about how is it that the scientists have for decades told us that we have a problem? And as you pointed out, Nicole, it's not only the climate crisis as in global temperature rise. We're talking about planetary boundaries that we're transgressing. So it is about the water, as well as the soils, as well as environmental breakdown. So how is it that the arts, at least in Germany, have come so late to the game? How is it that the theater of the Anthropocene, for example, that was started at the Humboldt University here in Berlin, has only like really launched a couple of years ago and not already decades ago? And I think, Lucy, I would love to hear from you a little bit more about the structure that you've also really like looked into with Julie's Bicycle, with your organization, that is very differently shattered around the world, like the structure that is provided for artists and innovators to be creative in this sustainable sector. You have looked into it with your creative climate cities program, where you have looked to cities from Taipei to London. Maybe you want to say a word about how that plays out.
Well, I think it speaks to a really sort of interesting point. And, a few of us here are based in different parts of the world. What we've developed working with a lot of cultural organisations in the UK, I guess has sort of created a blueprint for an approach for a cultural organisation to sort of start and move along this journey toward sustainability. But obviously the operating contexts are completely different, geographically, culturally, financially, socially. So when we do any project that is international in scope, we always do it in a co-creative way with local partners to ensure that actually there is something kind of workable on the ground. What we've developed is quite locally specific. We think in the sort of learnings that we've established, there is value for others, but we sort of seek, as I say, to do that in partnership. And the city's work was really interesting because we sort of took these 4 key areas to look at a city's connection between culture and climate. So we looked at policy, we looked at sector support structures, we looked at
the sector support structure.
What the city, sort of what the local government was providing cultural organisations. Maybe it was access to money, maybe it was sort of guidance or access to an expert. So what kind of support that they were providing. So these different sort of enabling factors, all at creative commissioning. And what we saw was sort of completely different creative responses across the 14 cities that we worked with. And these cities are all part of the World Cities Culture Forum membership, which is a network of kind of quite iconic large cities across the world whose culture departments exchange good practice around cultural policy. So it was with them, this partner who was the network holder, that gave us access to these different contacts. And in a place like Amsterdam, there was much more of a focus on quite technocratic solutions. So they had this amazing web page for cultural organizations to learn about solar panels and feed-in tariffs, and where to see this kind of green investment funding, or who to work with if you want to do a building audit. Whereas the work that we sort of investigated in Lagos often was much more focused on sort of sustainability and social justice. So it was climate through a justice lens, and it was sort of more focused on grassroots education for sustainability. So a really different operating context, and more focus on policy that I guess is trying to look at a different kind of development paradigm. You know, there's some really interesting work happening around how do you sort of leapfrog over all the incredibly unsustainable urbanism of the quote global north, and where culture kind of sits within that question. And so that was a sort of really exciting sort of element to that. I think that study, you know, when you look at all of the cities together, you see the range of different responses. And you're like, well, if I could, like, this policy is brilliant. So, you know, I mean, really inspired by that policy and the idea of that training program and this investment fund. So you can almost think, well, I'll, you know, cherry pick here, here, and here, and you know, think about how that could be applied, you know, wherever the reader is. Or that's the hope of the research anyway. It's all available on our website, so anybody who's welcome to read it. But it's this kind of culture, climate, cities nexus, and I think it's a great example of more cities thinking in an interdisciplinary way and thinking across their different departments. So, you know, beyond this really siloed approach to you do economy, you do culture, you do environment, to thinking about, okay, we need to act on climate change. So this needs economists, of course, this needs natural heritage experts, this needs communicators, this needs artists. So yeah, I'm hoping something that's making me feel very kind of optimistic about the city space.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for pointing out again to me this was a new approach to like also think about the innovations coming from policy at a city level, maybe, because even in Germany, yeah, many of the culture decisions are made on a federal, like not on the level of the Republic of Germany, actually. But you do have, yeah, in your Creative Green Awards that you just awarded last week, I did see a really great variety of theaters and of individual like songwriters who write songs about the environmental breakdown and species extinction that I haven't seen here in Germany. So yeah, Nicole, maybe you want to say something about why also you have mostly collaborated with startups in the past years and maybe not so much with artists. What do you think?
I just wanted to add to Lucy, maybe not yet, yeah. So we have this this kind of that artists pick up, let's say, on scientific topics and innovations. Not yet, because next Sunday I will facilitate also an online workshop between Scientists for Future and Artists for Future, and actually this is the goal, let's say, to transfer the knowledge of the scientists towards the artists. And when I tell you that the scientists thought, no, the artists have to read our texts and then they come up with creative solutions, I was totally against it when I heard it, and was like, no, I will facilitate, and then you will see if something can happen. But you cannot talk to artists like that. And even the scientific text, they were so boring, let's say. that a friend of mine, and she wrote a master's thesis on automated car driving, yeah. And she also was like, even she had difficulties to understand the text. So let's see. We will cover all kinds of topics, but we will start with mobility next weekend. So I'm super curious about that. And I think more and more platforms actually look after artists, but I have the feeling we have to invite them, and because it's not so easy, because in the art realm, this discourse is not really there. So it's even not there that artists think about their practices, whether they are sustainable or not. And I think also regarding Olafur Eliasson's work, Ice Watch, we really have to be careful nowadays what kind of values we share. And if we bring glaciers or glacier ice from the Arctic to cities, if many other artists would see that as a model and would also go there and bring more ice here, you know, I mean, we really have to think about consequences. And I think, and this is the great learning process we are in at the moment, right? To really shape the future we want, but we always have to check out whether the impact or the art we are creating or the solutions we are creating really make sense and really are applicable and have the potential to be adapted in a way. And I think this kind of reflection is super important on all kinds of activities at the moment, so that we really go slowly but really carefully into the futures and then see what we are actually capable of if we really can shape these futures we want to be in, and this is kind of a new greening. And it's also very interesting for me, even people from the economy sector, they also want to go to the new greening, but nobody is asking them whether they want or not. So I think here again we need more artists to come to the table, because they can open minds, they can bring new ideas in. And I always see art also like this kind of neutral playground where you first are invited, and it's not about your status or whatever you bring in, right? So it's really kind of neutral space where you can explore, where you can play, where you can deal with each other, come closer, and so on. And that's why artists are so important for me, and I would love to inspire artists to come to the table and to help us in this kind of huge project and huge transformation.
Can I add one tiny thing to that? Sorry, Teresa. That is such an important point. And actually, we hear that even now so frequently, this idea that artists should be, if they are invited, they are to do a kind of performance at the end of the conference, or to read out a poem, or have the art as the kind of the backdrop. And it's a really kind of reductive way to engage with arts and culture. So it is important to invite. It's really important, as I'm sure Nicole will agree, to also pay artists, because there's also this a very frequent issue where people expect artists to want to be able to work for free, or to apply for sort of commissions and do huge amounts of very kind of competitive work for no reward. So there is a really important issue here about recognizing the full spectrum of value that artists can bring into this space, and also making sure contribution is properly remunerated.
Totally agree.
Thanks for pointing that out again. I do remember the exhibition at Zentrum für Kunst und Medien, ZKM, in Karlsruhe in 2016, which was called Reset Modernity. And there, one photographer actually took a photo of the silver mine that is extracting the silver that needs to be used for the exhibition of his own photos. So I think, Silke Lichtenberg in the comments also just pointed out that there is raising awareness. This awareness is raising, or this consciousness about what kinds of materiality artists actually use. And as you pointed out in the beginning, Lucy, I think it's also good to think not only of impact, whether positive or negative, but also like to just make it transparent and include it into your communication of the artwork. So this is what I'm using, and then everyone can still like make up their own minds. And I think this is something that arts can definitely do, to just inspire and ask the right questions, or make visitors and spectators ask the right questions. Speaking of questions, there was like a short question about where to watch the movie. It's Okay to Panic, the film about the Polish scientist Professor Malinowski, is to be seen on the platform Kultur und Nachhaltigkeit.eu. And also, I'm actually not quite sure, is there a similar organization to Julie's Bicycle in Germany? I know that the Institute for Art and Innovation does I think the purpose is the same, to facilitate a collaboration between different kinds of sectors. As I understood it, though, Julie's Bicycle's core work is also like really doing research on in which kind of systems do we move. Something like the Creative Climate Cities program, as you said, is to showcase and to do the research, to then publish it, to make available just knowledge about how do different cities across the world fund a creative green culture. Nicole, do you know, can you say something about how does that compare, or do you think there's something like that would be missing in Germany? Maybe an overall board or somebody who brings together artists and the big funders.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a dream, let's say. We are working on it, but it's a hard way because here the structure is completely different. And we have a lot of art associations, but again, it's super isolated. Yeah, they are not connected really, and it really depends on the artist, whether they have a big name. Yeah, then it's maybe a bit easier to connect to other institutions and so on. But topic-related projects are really difficult to fund, even when they are interdisciplinary, right? And at the moment, I'm also involved in a new project here in Germany, and it's about the circular society. And this is kind of an interesting project, because here, at least the Institute was invited to participate in this kind of new project. And hopefully we can then bring more artists in. So this would be my my approach and my hope. And and then within the scientific circle, let's say, because it comes more from the science field, I hope that we then also can bring more policymakers and other stakeholders on the table. And when I think also of all these kind of multi-stakeholder coalitions that are forming at the moment, it's really not multi-stakeholders coalitions, right? It's again in these kind of intersectoral realms. And but for me, it's really, if we want to create this kind of new structure also for our economy, then we need all kinds of perspective in it. And even children would be then welcomed, yeah. And I mean, there are so many issues everywhere, and I think this is why I think it's so important that we have to be creative ourselves, yeah, to really understand that we are humans full of potentials on all kinds of levels, and we have to connect and reconnect and and share the real values we want to build up.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy, for sharing with us the link artistsandclimatechange.com, where there's a showcase of Berlin's top 10 Initiatives for artists around art and climate change. I think what is actually interesting about the different series that are ongoing there is that you do see a highlighting of indigenous voices, Black artists and storytellers. B.D. Finzi, who has started the Climate Story Lab in New York, has recently said during the last session that for too long, white men have been trusted as being the messengers of the climate crisis. And I think it's interesting when I now think about the film that Jonathan made. I think what she wants to say is white men in their role as just being a functional, like in their function of being a scientist. And I think it's very interesting that Jonathan, that you kind of achieved to break this by really showing Professor Malinowski as a person who is really afraid for the fate of humanity on this planet, and as not just displaying him as this as this professor that has to reproduce facts, and then somebody else can make an art piece about it, but he's really just like shown as this human who cares. And I think this quality of care is something that we all should invite more into our lives. Jonathan, maybe if there's no more questions in the chat, then I would just invite all of you, starting with Jonathan, to maybe take a moment and think about, for the future that we're always talking about here, maybe the near future, what is it that you would need as a structure to be able to really produce an art piece that you would think is truly inspiring and innovative? If you think about next year.
When you talk, I don't know how it is with other art forms. I just make it, like, I never even went to film school. I started making movies when I was like 27, and I bought a camera and I just taught myself how to do it using YouTube videos. And then now I've made 4 movies, and they're all really, really low budget movies, but you can buy a good quality digital camera these days and make a high quality work of art. You could make a film that touches people for not a lot of money. The first movie I made probably cost like $6,000 or $7,000, but I managed to sell it to a Polish TV station later after I made it. I mean, I didn't profit from it in the end because they don't pay anything, but people, you can, if you want to make a movie now in 2020, you need you need some money to have the freedom to be able to not have a real job. Like I couldn't have made the movies that I made if I had like a full 40-hour-a-week job in an office. I mean, I have a wife, I have a kid who goes to a small private school that I have to pay for every month. So I need my basic needs to be taken care of. But beyond that, if you talk about documentaries, they cost money, but they don't cost that much money. And if you have a good story and you have something that you really want to say, you can find creative ways of doing it without needing a lot of money. But you need time, and you need to find also people who understand what you're doing. You need to, like, what I do, I have a very small crew. It's like when I make a movie, it's like me and 4 or 5 other people, and everybody gets it that we're not doing this to make money. This is not a commercial enterprise for, making millions of dollars. We're trying to do something that's important. We're trying to do something that we care about. We do need to make some money because that's how you survive. You keep food on the table, keep the roof over your head. But what I see now is we have a cynical culture all over the world where the big media companies want to do things that look ambitious, but they really just want to be safe and they want to be acceptable so that they can keep making more and more money. Did you know that all of these Netflix documentaries and most of the HBO documentaries and other media stuff, it's all scripted? It's all written down. They know exactly what they're going to get before anybody actually goes and films anything. And so in the end, it is some sort of art because they wrote a script and then they executed it. But what happens is that people watch it and they get something from it, and maybe they learn something, but they don't really feel it because it feels like a commercial enterprise that doesn't resonate with people. And I think that's what I would like to see is more people who are not afraid to say what they really think and to show who they really are, because there are a lot of institutions and a lot of media organizations and governments, and they all say they want to do the right thing, but there's no face of the organization, there's no real leader, and then it just falls flat and it doesn't connect with people on this human level. And so I would hope that there would be more. And the problem is a lot of artists now, they need money, and it's easier to go and make a TV commercial.
Yeah. I think it's very inspiring actually to listen to you and see that you don't need money to make a film. And I think what I take from it is that you need time as a resource, but then as a driver for your art, you just need the idea. And I think that's
and freedom.
Really amazing call for other artists to join. Nicole, would you like to give us a few last words? What do you think could be a driver for change in the sector? What is something that you would wish for?
Sorry, was that for me?
It was for Nicole.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so a driver. I mean, for me, I really hope I can inspire as many people as possible to be part of the change and to come out of all the little hidden places, so that we see each other, that we support each other, that we know of each other. And so for me, it's really to span networks of all the change makers that are already out there, and to join forces. For me, it's always about joining forces. So not to compete change makers, so that we are really get more aligned and trust each other. Because for me, it's also really about building trust in the new, and not get discouraged or depressed because you cannot change or you think you cannot change. And therefore, I hope that all artists, all cultural workers, all people with a heart and with a mind and with a sense of full potential human being, and the feeling of connectedness to other species and to the planet itself, that they come all on board.
You. Lucy, what would you like to see more of in the world of the arts?
Well, obviously more money. I mean, loads more money. My colleague circulated a really interesting stat the other day about how much recovery funding had gone into something green, and considering the rhetoric in Europe regarding green recovery and the European Green Deal, it was astonishingly small. There is, at the moment at least, in the UK, there have been various emergency funding for culture, which is brilliant, but we really need adequate resource to help the cultural sector reduce its environmental impact, which has the knock-on effects of organizational resilience, efficiency, reduced expenditure, and to be able to use that then investment to have wider societal benefits. So even though it's a bit trite to say money, because that's what all artists and organizations want, it is so essential. And the second, which I think everyone can do, and it's thanks to my great fellow panelists that more of this work is happening, but we just need to normalize this conversation, even if it's right now you're not able to do anything practical, just to make it part of the conversation when people are thinking about artistic projects, that environmental constraints are as much of an issue as economic ones. And yes, people don't want, you know, creativity to be you know, diminished, but I think this idea that art should be completely free is wrong, and it's actually really dated, because artists have always had constraints, and we need to change every single person's consciousness about this big question of, you know, of freedom and what it means to live on a planet with 7 billion others, and in conditions of already huge inequality. And what does it really mean for people in Europe, as an example, to think about themselves and the work they produce very differently in accordance with climate and social justice?
Yeah, thank you very much for these very good closing words to our session. I think something that really inspired me is, just to quote again the Institute for Art and Innovation, yeah, your voices and the talks, bringing voices from artists, bringing these ideas, actually also looking at the web platform, which I invite all of you to do once the session is over. Yeah, to quote the Institute for Art and Innovation again, is that aesthetic revolution comes before the societal revolution. So I think it's there's still way to go, and there's a lot of inspirations yet to come. Thanks a lot, all of you, for joining, and I wish to see you soon, in one way or the other. Maybe out on the streets, maybe in a gallery. Thank you for joining tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you all. I thank the four of you, and also thank the audience out there. I mean, when we planned this evening, we hoped that it would be as lively and as inspiring as it really was. And in the end, I mean, Lucy, you mentioned a lot, you had a lot of sort of big questions. Of course, the role of culture, who's paying for it, and how we live together on this world. So I really enjoyed listening to all of you. Thank you very much. And